Hello and welcome to the Elders Insight, an exciting new podcast series presented by Hepworth & Associates, your source for advocacy, advisory, and planning insights for seniors, pre-seniors, and their caring families. Today's podcast is sponsored by Rotary Dial Media. So let's get started with the show on location today in Toronto.
Well, here we are again with another episode of the Elders Insight. And what a great day for a podcast. We continue to thank you for your positive responses that we're getting, and we thank you all for your email questions, your thoughts, ideas, and your thumbs up. Clearly, we're onto something here, and that is really a need for the kind of information we're bringing you to all through these podcasts. So stay tuned for more episodes and tell everyone you know to dial in, or I guess the phrase is click in. And remember, all the episodes of the podcast are recorded and available on the website, Hepworth & Associates, www.hepworth.ca. My name is Gary Hepworth, and I'm your host for this podcast here on the Elders Insight. And today we're live from Toronto, Canada. Today's episode is entitled, Where Will I Live? As the whole subject of housing in general is a key element of our aging well model. For most of us, our decisions on where to live as we age will be determined by generally three things: our health, mobility, and our finances. Having an awareness of the options available so that you can put your own plans together just makes good sense. Our experience, though, with those who have not planned ahead for possible differing housing needs, is that they may have to make decisions in a crisis. And making decisions in a crisis is rarely a good thing. So to help us better understand and consider these situations and the options available to us for our housing plans these days, I have a talented individual in front of me by the name of Nancy McLeod from Rethink Your Real Estate. Nancy is a real estate professional, interior designer, and a whole lot more from right here in Toronto. Hello, Nancy.
Hello to you too, Gary. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you.
Great to see you too. Happy to be here on Elders Insight. I have some professional experience and personal experience with today's topic, so I'm happy to help out.
Great, Nancy. I was reading your bio the other day, and you're a proud Western Canadian girl, I see, from a big family, and you've lived in different parts of the world. So how has that shaped the way you help your clients who are either approaching retirement or well into the retirement years?
I am a proud Canadian, Gary, thanks. I've moved around the country and elsewhere, Edmonton, Calgary. I went to London, Ontario for university, Bermuda for a while, and then back to Toronto. I received my interior design degree here as well as my real estate license.
Great.
I got the moving bug, I think, from my parents. They downsized many times from my dad's work. I actually did a count. Since I left home to go to university, they moved 11 times.
Wow.
I know. They moved cities twice and 4 times in just 7 years. Sounds crazy, but their reasoning really does make sense. The homes they were living in just no longer suited their lifestyle. I think some of your listeners can relate to this.
I agree, yes.
Here's an example of a lifestyle move. When my parents downsized back to Edmonton, they had a house built in a quiet neighborhood overlooking the river, but they didn't stay long. They were first-time empty nesters, and they found that the riverside location was just too quiet and too far removed from the action, as they called it. So they moved downtown, rented, then bought, and redesigned the space so it could suit their needs. They eventually went to Vancouver again for my dad's work, where they rented a condo, bought a townhouse in Victoria, not Vancouver, so they could retire. But unfortunately, my dad passed away. My mum, now on her own for 25 years, has moved several times. All of these really a result of healthcare needs. Whatever the reason, my parents would bring me in every time to help, so I certainly learned to redesign, declutter, and downsize very early in my career. Not only does moving run in the family, but many of us, and still are, in the helping people profession. My dad was a doctor. My mom did a little bit of nursing. My maternal grandfather was a dentist. My grandparents on the other side owned a furniture store and the funeral home in a small town. Apparently, in those days, they went hand in hand.
It's a good combination.
It is. It all has to do with wood, I think.
Yes.
A cross-section of services for sure, but all these professions, including mine, have one thing in common, that they help people cope with change, and change can be stressful. Family moves and professions have shaped how I work with clients, especially those retired or getting there. I grew up with change, surrounded by family that helped others cope with it. So I'm an honest professional and a people person. I'm friendly, approachable, patient most of the time, and polite. I'm a Canadian after all.
Of course, that's good. Okay, Nancy, as you know, we get all sorts of questions from our clients who come to our many presentations. So I think I came up with the top 7 questions.
Great.
That we get on the area of where will I live?
Mm-hmm.
So let's get started. So a lot of our clients talk about retiring and getting out of the city to find a quiet spot up north on the water. So what should they be thinking about?
A client is, if they're considering a move to a more rural lakeside area, they really need input from a local expert. I think these types of properties have some really unique conditions that we're not used to here in the city, like septic beds, wells, waterfront. If they're thinking of building, they may be up against a different set of guidelines or restrictions, so they may to make sure they do all the necessary research. Also, before buying the perfect property, I think retirees might want to consider renting for a year or some period of time. Moving away from family, friends, favorite restaurants, and activities is really a big deal. In fact, I know 2 couples here in Toronto that have returned to the city because it was just too quiet for them in the country.
Too quiet.
Too quiet. Regardless of whether I think retirees decide to rent, buy, or even build, there's some day-to-day issues they need to think about when they're leaving. I have 3 examples for you, but there might be a few more for certain people under their personal circumstances. First, if you don't drive or you're eventually unable to, you need to think about access to some of the very basic stuff. Grocery stores, drugstores, hardware stores. They need to be within walking distance, or sourcing a delivery service might be necessary.
That's a good point.
Yep. Secondly, if you need medical attention, visits to specialists, think about how will you get there and how will these services get to you if you can't. The third example, I think, which is just as important, is what kind of activities do you do outside the home? Where and what do you like to do for fun? I think it's nice to get away to the quiet waterfront, but if all your activities that you enjoy are here in the city, you'll want to find some up there. Or
so driving, healthcare, and friends and hobbies and interests. Good points.
Yep.
So another approach we hear a lot about is to sell one's big house in the city and move to a condo, because it looks like people will end up with a big profit from the sale, along with no more maintenance. Is that a good plan?
It can be a good plan. Selling a big home and moving to a smaller place can be a very smart financial decision. Proceeds from the sale will pay for the purchase or the rent of a new place and hopefully many years of fun. Before you make a move, I think, though, it's good to check with a real estate expert. You want to make sure that the proceeds from the sale are sufficient for the location and the type of downsized home that you want. A financial planner or investment advisor should also weigh in to make sure that you run the numbers and they fit your overall plan. Most of the experts I've spoken to recommend renting when you retire as opposed to buying. They think that the proceeds of the sale should be available for day-to-day living and investments. You'll be responsible for paying your rent and hydro plus some insurance, but these costs will increase over time, but as I say, very slowly. If you rent, you will not be responsible for the unexpected or escalating costs that can interrupt a retirement plan. Property taxes, maintenance fees, special assessments, or repair, sometimes replacement of larger expensive items such as kitchen appliances have to be remembered. In a condo, I think whether you rent or own, everybody needs to think about the pluses and minuses. Condo living can be maintenance-free, but it's certainly not hassle-free. Here's some of the things that I think you should think about. The elevator can be a problem. Not everyone likes riding in one, and they don't always work well. There was a recent article in the paper here in Toronto citing an article where both elevators in a building were out of order for 24 hours.
Ugh.
Yeah. It isn't a good thing for anybody, let alone someone with accessibility issues. Height. Think about it. Beautiful views, but if you don't like being up high, you might want to consider a condo on the main floor. You can look at the garden, and you won't have to take an elevator. Bonus.
Is it ground floor much cheaper than?
Not necessarily. There's fewer units available, so sometimes they can be in big demand, but others like the security of being up a little higher. Pets have become quite an issue in condos. A local developer in my area actually created a manual that they give to all residents called Petiquette. Yes. Yeah, okay. Everyone needs to keep up to speed on the do's and don'ts of the four-legged residents. Bottom line is there's those who love them and those who do not like pets, and sometimes they don't always see eye to eye. If you're thinking of a condo with pets, always get the official word directly from the property management because these rules can change. Don't take the word of another resident, landlord, or even the realtor. You want to make sure that your dog or cat can come with you when you move. Smoking is another big thing in buildings these days, so check out those rules. And yes, in Canada, there'll soon be some rules coming out about cannabis use, so pay attention.
It's coming up fast, isn't it?
Parking details, I think, are a big one. Some units you rent or buy have parking, some don't. You can often rent them within the building. If you have a car, though, make sure you can actually park your car in the parking spot. It sounds basic, but new buildings have some very small spots, and for some reason our cars seem to be getting bigger and bigger. I knew of a buyer that happily moved into his brand new place, and he couldn't use his parking spot.
Wow.
Yeah. Final issue, I think, is demographics. There's some buildings, downtown especially, that attract a younger crowd. They can be a little noisy coming to and from work and later in the evening. Some of these buildings have a large percentage of units rented out for the short term. Airbnb is an example, and I'm sure you've heard some of the complaints. If you're looking for something quiet, though, I think a smaller building away from the downtown core is generally a safer bet. There's some really big advantages to living in a condo. Here's a few of them you might want to think about. One-level living. Elevators, grand entrances make condos accessible to everybody. Not only are they accessible, but they can be very beautiful. Arriving home to a 5-star hotel.
Sounds good.
Sounds pretty nice to me. There's often an array of amenities to enjoy. Party rooms, rooftop patios, pools, gyms, and even some small theaters. The cost of these are included in the maintenance fees, so you can use them quite liberally. Many buildings have book clubs, walking clubs, movie nights, and the like, so you can get to know your neighbors in a hurry. If you're living alone, this can be a really big plus. Events and community news are often available online. Buildings have their own websites, so you can stay connected to your neighbors. Concierge is a good thing. They help out from everything greeting guests to receiving packages. A lot of online shopping these days, so they're key. And finally, I think the biggest advantage in my mind to living in a condo is, aside from the upkeep of your own unit, cleaning, repairs, maintenance, as you mentioned, is all done by others. More time to have some fun.
Oh, many of us would like that aspect.
Absolutely.
Now, with these full-scale moves, the subject of downsizing often comes up. Any advice on that? As you know, these can be pretty emotional moments.
Yes, downsizing is inevitable with full-scale moves. Downsizing units and downsizing stuff, two different animals. There's simply not enough of large, old-school condos or apartments to go around, and they're often expensive, the bigger, newer ones. Retirement homes are very similar, in that the space is much smaller than we're used to. So if we downsize our space, we have to downsize our stuff. Furniture, decorative pieces, kitchen items, clothes, and even artwork. There's just fewer walls to hang it on. Some new items might need to be purchased, as some of the old ones won't fit. Often a dining room table is the big one. Downsizing can be time-consuming and, yes, very emotional, as you said. Where do I begin is the question I'm most often asked. My advice is to bring in an expert or a good friend that has gone through the process to get you started. And the key is getting started now. If you want to try some of this on your own, the strategy I use with clients is to tackle one category at a time. Your home will stay a little bit organized and you'll feel like you're getting somewhere. Start with the smaller items. Say, place all your vases, for example, on the dining room table, and it's much easier to pick one or two of your favorites when they're all there in front of you. Do the same with the tableware, books, linens. There's several books on the market. You can also read for additional inspiration. I think some people can get discouraged. I tell them that there really is a bright side. Donated items are greatly appreciated by the less fortunate or those just starting out, and we are contributing less to our landfill if we donate them.
That's a great point.
I think so.
So many of my clients tell me that they want to age at home. That's a common theme we hear. So clearly the aging in place concept has become the preferred option. But there's modifications of the home that's going to be required, like chairlifts, ramps, special bathroom fixtures.
Yep.
What kind of costs are we looking at there these days?
Costs. Well, aging in place does seem to be the preferred option. There's pros and cons for everybody, but if you decide to stay put, you definitely have to make some modifications, both for your comfort and definitely your safety. The modifications can vary depending on, I think, one, the size of your space and the configuration. So, for example, if you need to replace all the floors because you need something that's non-slip, if you have a 2,000 square foot home, it's going to be double that of, say, a 1,000 square foot. If you live in a bungalow with one floor only, you might eventually need a ramp to get you in the door. But if you have a 2-story home, a stair lift can also be required. Most often it's the bathroom that needs renovation, and really to install the basics, let's say a shower instead of a tub, a higher toilet seat, grab bars, improved lighting, and a non-slip floor. These costs can be upwards to $5,000 to $8,000 on the conservative side, I think. If a new washroom has to be added, say on the main floor, so you don't have to go upstairs, this could double. It's best to get, I think, a really good design in place. Get several quotes from contractors and adjust the plans if you need to, but never skimp on safety.
Because statistics will tell you that the most dangerous place in your house is the bathroom.
Absolutely.
That's where people need to invest the money, I think.
Absolutely. And don't forget that, accessible design, as they call it, can be very beautiful. Many of us associate aging in place or retired living with, drab finishes and easy clean surfaces, institutional grab bars. I think we should rethink that. Universal design is a term I learned when I was doing corporate work. In a nutshell, it refers to aesthetic design and usable space that's inherently accessible to everyone, whether you're young, old, able-bodied or not. So lovely finishes like stone, glass, metal, open plan, colorful wall treatments, functional furnishings, good lighting, blah, blah, blah. These are all part of a stylish and an accessible space.
Sounds lovely, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So when should people start thinking about these options, and where's the best place to start?
Okay, I cannot stress this enough. The time to start thinking about all this is now in capital letters. Decisions take time, and once the decisions are made, putting together the right group of family, friends, professionals can also take time. If family's involved with the day-to-day decisions, you need to get started earlier. I say this with a big smile on my face because we all know that everyone has an opinion when it comes to mom and dad. My own mom, who's in long-term care, will certainly back me up on this one. There was 4 of us. A to-do list or checklist is the best place to start. You might have one you could share, Gary. There may be additions, even deletions, given some personal circumstances, but the list is an excellent guide and will help the homeowner stay on track.
Yeah, thank you for that, because yes, we do use checklists and we encourage our clients to go through it.
Excellent.
So what do most people forget, when it comes to thinking about where to live? What do they often forget about?
I think people tend to forget that there's many other options out there. I encourage people to think outside the box a little bit. We still think of aging in place as staying in our home exactly as they are. This can be daunting given the chores, maintenance, clutter that can seem never ending. Even more so if we find ourselves living alone. Get out there and take a look around. Retirement living isn't what it used to be, and retirees are not what they used to be either. I recently connected with a group, lovely people, 2 couples actually, that have bought a home together right over here in Hyde Park in Toronto. They plan to renovate so they can cook together, drink wine on the porch together, and basically grow old together. Another great example, some of you may remember the Golden Girls.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the sitcom from the 80s, I think it was, where 4 older women shared a house? There's a real live example of this outside Toronto. Anyway, there's a few examples. They might not be for everybody, but ideal for 1 or 2 of you listening. You never know until you give it a try.
Because I think we're starting to hear more about NORCs now, which is the naturally occurring retirement communities.
Nice.
Watching with that interest. So
Absolutely.
that's the new trend.
Yep.
Let's talk about family. We talk a lot about the impacts on other members of the family when it comes to aging well. How can family be involved in the discussions of where to live?
What's the saying? Can't live with them, can't live without them.
Yep.
I touched on the issue of family before. I really recommend you gather them all together, let them have their say, and take it all under consideration, and then just do what you want. I'm kidding. Obviously, there's a need to put a plan in place for the long term, and you'll want your loved one's input. All the more reason to get started now, so you can decide where and how you want to spend your leisure time.
That's great. I always recommend clients do as much research as possible,
Absolutely.
especially when they're mobile and have time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, winding this up, any final thoughts you want to share with us?
Final thoughts. Where we live, I think, and how we live contribute big time to our physical and mental health. We're living longer and healthier lives than our parents or grandparents ever did. I don't think there's any reason not to give your next home or the renovation of your existing if you prefer the special attention you deserve. I think safe and supportive living can be stylish, and it never grows old.
That's a great thought. Nancy, a big thanks to you on behalf of our listeners and yours truly. As you know, our advice to our clients and listeners is about planning ahead, and that famous phrase, peace of mind, that comes from it.
Yeah.
So it's so good to hear from someone else who understands the importance of that message, especially when it comes to where one will live in their elder years.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Gary. A big thanks to you and your listeners. I'd love to join you again, as there's a lot more to discuss when it comes to the topic of where we want to live.
Okay, folks, that's a wrap for today's podcast, and we thank you all for joining us. I want to thank everyone who's been clicking in for our podcasts over the past few weeks. Your comments have been always encouraging. We continue for you to keep sending them in. And if you'd like to get in contact with today's guest, Nancy McLeod, just drop us a line and we'll make sure that happens. So stay tuned for more of our podcasts as we continue to provide you with those insights for seniors, pre-seniors, and their families for aging well.
Thanks for joining us today on The Elders Insight. We hope you found this podcast helpful, informative, interesting, and most of all, fun. We hope you can join us for our future podcasts as we continue to be your source for advocacy, advisory, and planning insights for seniors, pre-seniors, and their caring families. A big thanks to Hepworth & Associates team, and we look forward to seeing you the very next time here on The Elders Insight. You know, it could be me, but I'm starting to feel a little left out of what's all going on today. There's certainly a lot going on when I watch TV or read the paper or even when I stroll through the internet. In fact, there's too much of it, and it's always breaking news. How do I filter through all of this to find the things that are important to me without all the noise that comes with it? Rotary Dial Media. Media for the best of us.